Right, yesterday, Home Secretary Shabana Mahmood laid out her asylum seeker policy reforms. They're thought to be the biggest overhaul in about 40 years or so. And the government say the aim is to make it less attractive to claim asylum in the UK. Now, there's lots to go through in this document that they released yesterday, so we're just going to go through a few of the points from those plans. Higher financial incentives to return home voluntarily, confiscating assets to contribute towards accommodation, and if an individual can work, it will mean an end to automatic financial and accommodation support. So let's take a quick look at the numbers. There were just over 85,000 asylum applications in the year to March 2020-25. And in terms of where we sit compared to the rest of Europe, we are fifth in terms of the number of asylum claims in Europe. So we're not, by any measure, top of the list when it comes to those seeking asylum. But what do you make, though, Gloria, of all the things that we're hearing at the moment, and what do you make of those plans?
Well, there's so many things to say about this, but I have to be honest. I mean, I always watch the news, and I was watching it very carefully, knowing I was going to be here today. I find it all a bit confusing because there was so much information coming out, and I watched a couple of news, one of the late-night news, etc. But so I was keen actually to read through the papers this morning, and of course, it's being hailed as the most sweeping asylum reform in modern times. And actually, the Home Secretary has been really sort of praised in most of the papers today about how strong she is and how determined she is to make change. And I just made a note of a couple of things, actually, because it just said, which is pretty straightforward, when protection is no longer needed, that the person really has to be liable for removal. And you would think, well, that actually could be logical. Financial incentives, as you mentioned, but, I heard somebody this morning saying, I got £3,000 to get out of the country, and I went out, but then I can come back in 2 years and get another £3,000. So you kind of raise your eyebrows at that one. And the other one that I actually raised my eyebrows at was the fact that jewellery and other assets, whether you had cash or even a car, they would be confiscated to make a contribution towards accommodation. Now, how would you police that one? I thought that was really strange. But, of course, it's a 20-year wait for permanent residency that's got the most publicity.
Yeah, because I just think with the permanent residency, I mean, we talk to a lot of refugees in the programmes that we do over at the news, and one thing that a lot of people talk about is the fact that if you come here and you're seeking asylum, say you're a teenager, for example, at 15 years old, so you go through the school system here, if you choose to go to university, you'll do an apprenticeship, you're learning stuff here, you then go into the workplace, and then you're working, you're contributing to society, all of those things, and then you reach your early 30s, and then they're like, right, off you go. And I think that's quite a difficult situation. I think once you're paying into a system for that system to then remove you. But this is one of several things that people have been discussing today. Not everybody is for this, though, are they, Janet? I mean, there's quite a few backbenchers in the Labour Party who are against it.
I think Labour think a lot of the proposals are frankly cruel and not in the socialist spirit at all. One thing I think about a lot of these proposals is they sound good on paper, but they could actually lead to more people going into the black economy, which is one of our big problems in this country, where people are working under the radar for cash in hand. And we've just seen on the news all these police raids on shops. We've seen the police raids on delivery workers, all people operating in the black economy, completely outside the system where you pay tax and national insurance.
But they all also tend to be underpaid and not paid a living wage, and have none of the protections and none of the things that the rest of us work in.
Yeah, but it doesn't justify... All right, that's it. That means that we should find a way to draw them in. But what I'm saying is the number of people working outside the system is increasing all the time. The part of these proposals that interests me the most is the right to family life. They're saying that if you come here with a legitimate reason and you claim a right to family life here, that will in future only apply to the immediate family, such as a parent or child. So we're seeing on the boats people bringing very small children in. So you might get a woman, a man and a woman bringing their child in, and they hope that that child will give them an increased chance to stay here under the right to family life. But what I know goes on is that some of these people then go on and have more children before their asylum applications are either approved or rejected. So what happens to those children that are born after they get here and before they've got permission to stay or leave? That is a huge question. That when government minister was asked it on the radio yesterday, he said, I don't know the answer, we haven't got round to that. Well, that's great, because there's no doubt that a lot of the people who have already arrived have had children. So what's going to happen to those
Well, you say,
children?
I mean, I think say a lot, but as we know, it tends to be proportionally more men that come over.
Yeah.
And then once they are able to be settled here, then they can send for a child or wife or what have you. So I think it's wrong to say the majority of them go on to have more children when the majority of people that are coming over tend to be male. But before we move on, what do you think of all this, Kel?
I find it really worrying, only because of the language that surrounds the conversation. Yes, we have a problem, we clearly have a problem, and we only have a certain amount of money to be able to run our country and to be able to look after the things that we need to look after as a society in the UK. And so the language that surrounds this whole debate is what I find disheartening and worrying. A close friend of mine who is a legal immigrant came here, paid £5,000 for her visa to come study and you know, wants to be able to contribute into our NHS service. That's the goal, and that's what she really wants to do. She was, you know, working legally as she's allowed to, and a person of age on a mobility scooter.
You mean a pensioner?
Say the word!
Well, I don't. What is a person of age?
But I don't actually think, in this case, I've been told she wasn't a pensioner.
All right.
She just had to use a mobility scooter.
OK.
So she drove the mobility scooter into my friend, who is a person of colour, and told her an expletive and told her to go back to where she came from. So my concern is that it stokes up more division, because, you know, I'm black, I can be told, and I have been told to go back to where I came from, and actually I was born here. So it's all of those complex nuances.
Kelly, we've got to have the debate. We've got to have the debate.
I agree.
We can't not have the debate.
I
agree.
agree.
Includes everyone, includes black people, whatever people.
Absolutely.
But I think it's the rhetoric surrounding the debate and things based on facts as opposed to
Could I say something very basic quickly? I know you've got to end, but very quickly. The reality is that we see both images on television day in, day out. We hear numbers day in, day out. And the vast majority of people, whether you're rich or whether you're poor, dreading the budget, not knowing how they're going to manage, how life is going to change. And I think that image of boats all the time, we forget sometimes what you've been talking about, the fact that a lot of people are actually legitimate refugees.
And they are human beings.
Yes, they are.
And I think one thing when I talk about facts, I mean things like, for instance, out of asylum applications into the UK, only a third of those applications come from people that have come over from small boats. So we sometimes have to look at what the images that we're seeing and relate that to the actual facts of the situation, which I think is
but
really
I'm saying
important.
the average person tends not to.
That's why we have ITV News.
Exactly.